Welcome back, sugar enthusiasts. Today we are going to be bringing our tulips to life with dusting, pollen, and taping. If you haven't yet seen part 1, be sure to check that out first in the description box below. I'll take you through all of the steps to make the petals, the centers, and everything you need to prepare for today. Dusting really adds life, depth, and lets you bring out your creativity when you're making sugar flowers. It is my favorite part. So be sure to subscribe if you do like this video, hit that like button too, and let's get right into dusting our tulips. So we're getting ready for dusting. I've put a piece of parchment paper down. I also have some cornstarch aside, and then I also have my pollen here. So this is just gelatin mixed with a little bit of warm yellow dust, and then confectioner's glaze, which we're gonna use to adhere the pollen to the tip of our centers. I'll just take you quickly through the colors that we'll be using. I have deep pink, imperial red, saffron, orange, yellow, and then 2 different moss greens from 2 different brands. I will of course link these all in the PDF section of the course. I have 3 of my dried petals. We will need 6 per flower. And I have my dried centers here as well. So either the 3 little flap things or the 4 are fine. And we're gonna start with those. I have some yellow dust here. I did not mix any cornstarch with it yet. And then I have some saffron too. And I'm just loading that up on the brush. So we're gonna start just by dusting the tip of our center with this color. Just really chalking it on there. Since we're using a lighter dust on a darker gum paste, you don't have to add any cornstarch because we want it to be pretty thick. So once that is nice and bright yellow on top, we're gonna get our confectioner's glaze. And we wanna be pretty conservative with this. We're just adding a couple little dots here and there. We don't want pollen everywhere. Tulips don't have, well, like, it depends really on the tulip, but I don't love it with like too much pollen. So once I've put those little dots, I'm just going to dunk that right into our gelatin mixture. Knock off the excess, and then our center is all complete. So once this is dried, you can even go back over it with a little bit more yellow if you find that it looks too desaturated or you just want to add a little more color. But besides that, our centers are totally finished and our stamens are done as well. As soon as they're dry, they are ready to use for the assembly portion. Time to dust our petals. All right, so we have a little bit of color mixing to do. We want to make a nice bright coral color that's going to be just more saturated than this current petal color is. So I'm going to start with some deep pink. Just mixing that in with a little bit of cornstarch. Next, let's grab some orange. A bit more orange. I'm gonna get a little bit of yellow in here. And you can really adjust this to whatever hue that you want to make for your cake. If you need something more on the pink side or maybe more on the orange side, just adjust it accordingly. Gonna add just a touch of that red. I'll add it on the side here so that we can just bring in small amounts since it's the darker color. Now let's take a look at how we like that. I think maybe a little bit more pink. I think this looks nice. So let's begin dusting. And we are gonna use a couple different colors here. So this is just kind of our base color. And the way I'll dust this is kind of going from the base, working my way upwards. And I want to follow the line of our veining. Otherwise, you're gonna get kind of splotchy marks. And this way, even if it's like not totally even, you at least are following the line. So I will just continue adding that color on until I am happy with the saturation that I've got. And of course, if this isn't dark enough, if it's too dark, just adjust as you need to. Add more color or add more cornstarch if you need to lighten it up. And that'll be, I think, more applicable if it's a slightly lighter flower. With these more saturated ones, it is hard to like overdust it, I would say. So let's flip this over and we'll do the same thing on the inside. Again, following our veining lines. So I'm going to do the other two petals with this color first before we move on to the next one. And I'm kind of leaving the edges a little bit undusted, only because we're going to add a lighter color onto that. And I don't want to make it more difficult for the color to show up. So I'm not trying to really like cover the entire petal in color. I'm just trying to add a little bit of nuance and depth to it. The reason that we color the gum paste is so we have that really nice base color to start with. And then we add the dust on just to create more depth and like a more realistic look. So it'd take a lot more time if we just started with a white petal. So I try never to do that. It's just too complicated and uses way too much dust and time. All right, next color. I think we will move on to the yellow color since we've already got a bit mixed here. And I'm going to add more of this bright yellow. I'm gonna add just a touch of cornstarch, barely any. And I'll do a touch of this saffron color too, to warm it up just a tiny bit. Where we're gonna concentrate this yellow color is on the edge. So I'm just gonna kind of pull it in from the edge, focusing it on kind of the parts that are the, I guess, like mountain parts, not the valley parts. So any parts that are sticking up a little bit, I will concentrate this yellow there a little bit more. And we want all of our petals to look slightly different, so just keep that in mind as you are dusting away. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let's flip over the petal and do the same thing on the inside. So we're just creating a really nice soft gradient between the yellow and then the pink or coral color. I don't want it to be like a stark line between the two. Okay, perfect. The last thing I want to do is just take a little bit of this yellow and I want to concentrate it near the base. You don't need a lot, but we're going to add some green down here, and I want it to be a nice transition between the green and the pink or coral. So just a little bit of yellow near the base, just to help with that softer transition. just like that. So again, let's start at the tip and we're pulling it downwards, concentrating that on like a few kind of streaks coming down. And blending until we're happy with it. Okay, and then just take a little bit at the base again, just so we have a nice blending between the green and the pink. Okay, we are on to our last color. So let me grab a different brush for the green and let's mix our moss green over here. Just a little bit of cornstarch. Our darker moss green, let's mix that up here. I'm gonna keep these kind of separate, but blend them together in the middle. I like having a gradient of color to work with so that I can kind of like swap back and forth depending on how it's being applied to the flower. So I'm gonna start with this lighter green, the brighter moss color, and I'm gonna blend that upwards. I actually need a different brush. I'm gonna use the same brush as I was using for the yellow. It's a little bit firmer, so it's gonna apply the color a bit better. And I need a bit more of that. So working the moss upwards a little bit. This is kind of a fresh, like bright green. And then we're gonna take our darker moss color and really concentrate that just at the base. So we create a nice gradient between all of the different colors. So it doesn't look like we just applied one color and then the next color and then one more color after that. Again, just blend upwards. And then final touch I like to do is sometimes add a little bit of a brighter green, kind of just in different spots here and there on the flower. And I always find this brings it to life a little bit more and gives it a bit more nuance rather than just being like a bright pink flower. So that petal is complete. Let's move on to the next. So again, start with our bright moss green right at the base, blending upwards. Take your darker moss, concentrate that at the base, really just like where it's intersecting with the wire. And you can use any like kind of darker green for this. I would say you could even mix this moss color with some black and that would probably bring you pretty close. All right, and then final step, just adding a few little dots here and there of our nice green color. And this is like, it's barely perceptible, but it does make a difference in the overall look of the flower. Final thing I forgot to mention that you can do is grab your center as well. And sometimes I'll use a little bit of our darker color right at the base. So just blend that upwards. And then you can use your brighter moss green closer to the top. I guess we could have done this before as well, but I just thought of it now, but I sometimes do this extra step. I mean, I would only do this if I know people are going to see the center like very closely. Okay, so there you go. There's our top. And then I did mention before we can add extra yellow. So if you want to do that, just pack it on the top there. And it just makes it look a little bit more pollen-like. Just be careful since your little gelatin pieces might start coming off if you're too rough with it. But yeah, that is what our center looks like. I will finish up all of these petals and then we can get to taping them all together. On to our final step here. So I've got some green tape, and this is kind of like a muted, mossy, mid-green tape, and I love this kind of color for cakes. I just find it's a lot more realistic than like a bright green tape would be. But of course, it totally depends on the palette that you're working with and all of that, but I do tend to gravitate a bit more to these muted colors. So we've got all of our pieces here. I'm just using these pre-made stamens, the brown ones that I showed you before. And then I've got my 6 petals prepared, and then of course my center. So we're gonna start with the center, and we'll just start by sticking on our stamens. Grab your tape, and I'm gonna wrap it around maybe 1 centimeter down. Wrap it around once and then slide that all the way up. Now I usually grab 2 or 3 stamens at a time, and I'm going to place those just lower than the level of our center. And I want them to all be just slightly different in height. Don't overthink it, just stick them on around this height. So I'm just holding them at the base and then just taping around once. It's very easy. I'm trying to make sure that they're fairly evenly spaced. So once I've got those all on, I'm gonna tape downwards. I'm gonna tape all the way just so that all of these are sealed in and they're not gonna move anywhere. Don't forget to stretch your tape as you're taping downwards because that activates the glue. Okay, so once those are all nice and secured, if you really wanted to go all out, you can go in with your brush and just take like a bit of a yellowy greeny color and work that up on the stem part of each stamen, just so it's not like pure white. It's something I'll do also with like the tips of stamens if they aren't quite the right color. I'll just dust them a little bit. So once we've got that all on, we can move on to our petals. What I like to do to start is just bend the wire back at around a 90-degree angle for each of them so that they're ready to go. Now, take your tape again. We're gonna start right at the top, wrap around once. Then we wanna kind of organize our petals too, sorry, we should have done this before, by whichever ones are the most cupped, those will go in the center, and then the ones that are less cupped will go on the outside. So, I mean, they might all look quite similar, in which case just stick them on wherever they feel like they're fitting nicely. So I'm just gonna hold this right at the base. And I wanna get that tape as close to the top of the wire as possible so we can cover as much as possible. So I'm just gonna go around once, get our next petal. And then we're just evenly spacing 3 petals around first. These will be our center petals. And just make sure you're pulling that tape really nice and tight. Now we can put on our last 3 petals, so those will go staggered in between each of these. And they will kind of shift around a little bit, so don't worry about that. We can fix them all up afterwards. This one got a little bit of a crack in it. So if this was a real flower that I was going to use on a cake, I'd probably replace this with a new petal. So once they're all on, what we want to do is tape down really nice and tight to make sure that these are not going to move anywhere. If you don't tape securely enough, your petals might start shifting or rotating, which is very annoying when you're trying to arrange them on a cake and you just want, you know, a petal to stay in a certain spot. I'm just pulling that tape super tight as I rotate the stem. All right, so now that our flower is all taped up together, we can just adjust our petal placement until you're happy with it. And then of course, like some flowers, I'm gonna do much more closed. So they would be almost like this on the cake. And I guess you can see now why it might be helpful to have like some that are cupped slightly differently, because the ones that are cupped less will lay a little bit more flat onto the flower. But generally I like to do slightly more open ones anyway, just so they look like they're just starting to bloom a little bit, like that. You can see our beautiful inside now too. The pollen catching the light is really beautiful. And then we have our stamens there. You can see how tiny they are. So if you do want to make them, go for it. Or if you can't get your hands on these brown stamens. But I find these ones to be a fine substitute for most cakes. So yeah, that is how we make a tulip. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this more in-depth style of tutorial. Again, you can find more of these tutorials every single month. There's a new one on the Finespun Cakes Academy website. Check that out in the description box below. We would love to have you in our little sugar community. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on more, and I'll see you next time.